Waitress with 3 kids sold app for $500 million. Sarah wasn't just tired, she was a ghost haunting her own life. A life measured in coffee pots refilled, sticky tables wiped, and the faint, ever-present smell of grease clinging to her uniform. 3 kids. 3 beautiful, bottomless pits of need and love. At night, after her shift, she'd sit at her rickety kitchen table, the bills a silent, screaming stack in front of her. The eviction notice was the loudest. 2 weeks. Her mind would race, a frantic hamster on a wheel. She'd look at the crayon drawing taped to the fridge, a lopsided house with 5 smiling stick figures. Her son drew it. A home. A simple, impossible dream. It was during one of these late-night panics, scrolling through her phone, that the idea sparked. She saw it everywhere, the chaos of parenthood. The forgotten appointments, the mismatched socks, the last-minute scramble for a babysitter. What if there was a way to organize the chaos? A central hub for families. An app. She had no money, no connections, and her laptop was a relic from a forgotten age. But she had the idea. And for the first time in years, a flicker of something that wasn't despair ignited within her. She started sketching interfaces on diner napkins during her break. She spent her tip money on coding for dummies. The other waitresses would see her hunched over her book, muttering about user flows and databases, and they'd just shake their heads. "Dream on, Sarah," one of them said, not unkindly. "Some of us have to live in the real world." The real world was harsh. The laptop died. The car broke down. Her youngest got sick. Each setback was a punch to the gut. She cried in the walk-in freezer at work more times than she could count. But then she'd look at her kids' faces, sleeping soundly, and the fire would burn brighter. She sold her grandmother's locket, the last piece of real value she owned, and bought a used, slightly newer laptop. Late nights turned into all-nighters. Fueled by cheap coffee, she taught herself to code, line by painful line. The kitchen table became her command center. Code on one screen, bills on the other. It was a race against time. The app, which she called Family Sync, was born. It was clunky. It was basic. But it worked. It organized schedules, managed chore lists, and had a feature she was particularly proud of, a trusted circle of babysitters sourced from local parent groups. She launched it quietly on the App Store, with no marketing budget, just a hopeful post on a few mommy blogs. For a week, nothing. Crickets. The eviction date loomed, a dark cloud on her calendar. She felt like a fool. All that sacrifice for nothing. She started packing boxes, a hollow ache in her chest. Then, her phone buzzed. A download notification. Then another. And another. A blogger in California had found Family Sync and written a post titled "This free app from a single mom just saved my sanity." It went viral. Within a month, there were 100,000 users. Then 1,000,000. Her phone never stopped buzzing. Investors started calling. Men in slick suits who talked in a language of series funding and equity that made her head spin. The first offer was for $5 million. She nearly fainted. She could pay rent not just for the next month, but for the rest of her life. She could buy a house. A real one, like in the drawing. But then she'd get messages from users. A military wife coordinating a deployment with her husband. A father managing care for his elderly parents and his own kids. Family Sync wasn't just an app, it was a lifeline. A bigger company, a tech giant named Omnicorp, came calling. Their offer was astronomical. But their vision was different. They wanted to monetize the user data, add intrusive ads, and change the core of what made it special. The lead negotiator, a man named Mr. Thompson, was condescending. He looked at her not as a creator, but as a lucky waitress who'd stumbled upon a winning lottery ticket. He said, "Let's be realistic, Ms. Garcia. You're in over your head. Take the money and go buy yourself a nice house." His words stung, but they also clarified everything. She thought of the locket. She thought of the late nights. She thought of the family she was helping. This was hers. She walked away from the deal. Her friends, her family, everyone thought she was insane. 5 million, Sarah. What are you doing? The pressure was immense. Omnicorp, furious at the rejection, began developing a clone, pouring millions into a campaign to crush her. Her user growth stalled. The narrative shifted. She was no longer the brilliant underdog, she was the foolish waitress who got greedy. The money she'd made from premium features was drying up, and the server costs were crippling. The eviction notice was back on the table. It felt like the end. She sat at her new, slightly less rickety table, staring at the same kind of final notice. It was all happening again. She had flown too close to the sun, and the fall was brutal. She was about to give up, to call Omnicorp and take whatever scraps they'd offer. Then, an email arrived. The sender was a name she vaguely recognized, David Chen, a quiet, low-level programmer from Omnicorp she'd met once. The subject line was just 2 words, the back door. He wrote that he was one of the lead developers on Omnicorp's clone app. He told her how Mr. Thompson would mock her in meetings, calling her story a fluke. But David, a single father himself, had been using Family Sync for months. He said it had changed his life. He couldn't stand by and watch them destroy it. He had found a critical, unfixable flaw in Omnicorp's architecture, a security vulnerability so deep it would take them a year to rebuild from scratch. And he attached the proof. He wrote, "Your story inspired me. Don't let them win." Sarah's hands were shaking. This was the weapon she needed. But it was also a choice. She could leak the information, destroying Omnicorp's project and reputation. It would be justice. Sweet, cold revenge. But it would also ruin David Chen. He would be sued into oblivion, blacklisted from the industry forever. Or, she could use it as leverage. She scheduled one last meeting with Omnicorp. This time, she wasn't the timid waitress. She walked into their gleaming boardroom, her head held high. Before Mr. Thompson could even speak, she slid a single piece of paper across the polished table. It was the report from David. Thompson's face went pale as he read it. The arrogance vanished, replaced by a flicker of panic. "What do you want?" he finally stammered. Sarah smiled. "I want $500 million, she said, her voice steady. And a 10% stake for my lead developer, Mr. David Chen. Anonymously, of course. He'll be receiving his own independent contract. And one more thing," she added, leaning forward. "You will issue a public apology for attempting to clone my app, and you will make a $10 million donation to a fund for women in tech." It wasn't a negotiation. It was a surrender. The deal was signed. The news broke, and the world was stunned. The story wasn't just about the money. It was about the waitress who outsmarted the giant. The mom who refused to be bullied. The next day, Sarah walked into a real estate office. She didn't buy a mansion. She bought a simple, sturdy house with a big backyard, on a quiet street. The same house from the crayon drawing on her fridge. That evening, as her kids ran laughing in the yard, she sat on her porch, her phone buzzing with news alerts about her. But she wasn't looking at them. She was looking at her family. She had built more than an app. She had built a home. And she realized that the $500 million wasn't the real prize. It was just the receipt.